everybody. Welcome back to Earth and Star Spiritual Wellness Center. Mommy wounds been getting you down lately? Daddy wounds keeping you from that perfect relationship? There comes a time in your healing journey, in your personal evolution, where the question of your healing begins to deepen. In the beginning, we're often focused on what happens in our own lives, healing the trauma and the wounds and the pain that we consciously remember and have been through. Our experiences, our relationships, and the ways that our childhood and our environments that we grew up in shaped us. But over time, we might start to notice something a little deeper, certain emotional patterns that have been repeated, that feel older than our own story, or maybe we're having reactions in ways that reflect a wounding that we never personally went through. Some fears or reactions appear again and again in families, almost as if they've been traveling quietly through generations before arriving in us. And when people talk about mommy wounds or daddy issues, it's often framed in a very personal way, sometimes with a sense of blame towards our parents. And when we step back and look a little more broadly, we begin to see that these patterns are rarely just about that one relationship. They're often part of a much larger story, one that includes not just our parents, but our grandparents and great-grandparents and their parents, and the many lives that came before them. In that sense, healing becomes something much bigger than improving our own lives or our relationships with our direct parents. It becomes participation in the evolution of an entire lineage. The awareness we bring to our own patterns has the potential to interrupt cycles, to break chains that have been repeating for decades or even centuries. When we start to look at it this way, the idea of ancestral wounds becomes less about blame and more about understanding the deeper forces that have shaped us in the past. And there's something we can do about this, because we do hold accountability. We do place boundaries. We do want to clear these things from our own bodies and minds and emotions so that we can live a happy, peaceful life and not keep repeating these patterns. So when we talk about ancestral wounds, we're referring to emotional and energetic imprints that have been passed down through generations. Let's first understand what an ancestral wound is and then how to break it. Those imprints that are in us often originate through powerful experiences: war, displacement, betrayal, loss, poverty, or even just prolonged stress. And human beings carry the memory of these experiences in more ways than we originally understood. Again, we think about healing as if it's just the memories that we've been through. We don't always think about these imprints as sitting inside of our energetic field, informing our subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind speaks to us all the time, even when we don't understand it. And then this gets passed on and on and on. Science has begun to understand this idea through epigenetics, which suggests that the experiences of one generation can influence the biological responses of the next. Spiritual traditions have known this to be true for a super long time, but we call it something different. We have different language for it. So in metaphysical terms, it's believed that intense emotional experiences imprint not just on the emotion and the mind of the person going through it, but on the energetic field of the individual. And when a person goes through trauma or deep emotional hardships, the experience leaves a mark in that energetic body that becomes part of their lived identity, informing their subconscious mind, which informs their conscious mind and their emotions and their reactions. And in some traditions, this could be called their soul DNA or their energetic DNA that these imprints are passed down through. It becomes part of their identity through entire lines of family members, through whole lineages. That subtle patterning of consciousness that continues until it's broken, that continues until someone recognizes it and stops it. When children are born into a lineage, they inherit the physical genetics of the parents, and they also inherit the emotional environments, energetic tendencies, and subconscious patterns that were formed before they were even a thought. And this is why some people feel fears, anxieties, and emotional responses that seem disproportionate to their own life experiences. They may be carrying echoes of what their ancestors endured. And the reason that those echoes continue is because they were never resolved in their ancestors' lifetime. Breaking a chain or ending a pattern means resolving the wound and gaining the wisdom of it, the power of it. Families also pass down beliefs that reinforce those same patterns, ideas about their beliefs such as safety, love, power. Vulnerability becomes embedded in family culture. Children absorb these lessons naturally because they grow up inside of the emotional climate of the household. And by the time they reach adulthood, many of these patterns just feel like natural aspects of a personality rather than an inherited response. And when we begin to examine ancestral wounds, we often discover that some of the challenges we face today are really just connected to stories that began with our ancestors or our parents or our grandparents. Understanding this can bring both clarity in our own life and compassion for our parents or grandparents and the things that they went through and how they didn't have the tools to understand how to heal that at the time. It allows us to see that healing is not only about ourselves, but it's also about transforming patterns that have traveled through all of these generations. So when we recognize that some of these struggles may be connected to ancestral patterns, we start to think about how we can change them, not just through our own healing, but through ancestral healing. Awareness is the powerful first step, especially since in order to have that awareness that something's moving through your ancestral line, you have to have a higher way of thinking. You have to be able to pull yourself out of your own day-to-day and realize, this is bigger than me. This isn't just me. You are having that awareness because you're capable of something more, because you hold the tools to that healing. You're a healer. And once we get into the awareness, that powerful first step, transformation requires engagement with both the emotional and energetic layers of those patterns. In shamanic healing practices, ancestral work often involves clearing the energetic imprint left by the trauma. The intention is not to erase the past or reject our ancestors, but our goal is to release the emotional burden that was carried unconsciously through these generations while preserving the strength, the gift, the wisdom, the power that those ancestors developed through those experiences so that we can claim that gift now. The gifts that you develop in your wounding, you don't actually have the ability to use until you heal the burden and the suffering of that wounding. Our ancestors passed down the resilience, the creativity, the survival instincts along with their wounds. And when the energetic weight of unresolved emotions begins to lift, we discover that the gifts of their lineage become accessible to us. They become tools that we can carry forward with us. The heaviness softens, and what remains is that deeper wisdom that helped those ancestors endure the difficult times. Except now, you're not in survival. You're not having to endure that. You just get the gift of the tool, the gift of the power, the gift of the wisdom, the gift of the strength. You can also begin breaking ancestral patterns psychologically, because we don't want everything. While we are healers here in this community, we don't want everything to revolve simply around having to work with a healer. You have the power to break these patterns with your own mind, and with the power of your mind, with your will. You can start breaking these patterns psychologically without that formal energy work. And this happens through conscious awareness, intentional thought patterns, and the choices that you make every day. When someone notices a reaction that feels inherited, or you have that awareness, oh, my mom would have reacted like this, or my dad would have acted like this, I've become my dad, but you mean it in a negative way versus a positive way. Maybe this is a tendency towards fear, silence, looking away from something difficult, self-doubt. You can pause and ask yourself whether that response truly belongs to the present moment, whether this is something you truly want to live, or if it might just be an old family pattern expressing itself again. And by choosing different actions, and by speaking honestly instead of remaining silent, setting boundaries instead of tolerating harm, practicing self-compassion instead of repeating inherited criticism and judgments, you can gradually reshape the emotional landscape of your life. Over time, those small little choices that you're making in the moment create a new neural pathway, a new emotional habit, allowing you to live in ways that are less constrained by the past and open towards what you're trying to create in the future. Spiritual traditions often describe this support in this process through using spirit guides or power animals. And in this process, animals have their own wisdom, their own medicine. They represent certain ideals that can help support us when we do this, because it's not easy, right? If we're doing this purely psychologically, or even if we have the energy work done and we're trying to move forward in a different way, it's not easy to do. We have to catch ourselves in the moment, change the way we think, and react from a new thought. We have to carve those new neural pathways into our brains. And so we can call on guides and spirits, angels, power animals to help assist us in this. And animal guides are often associated with ancestral healing because they represent instincts and natural wisdom. The wolf is connected with lineage and the intelligence of family systems. I have a wolf that represents family to me and leadership in family systems. The bear symbolizes deep healing and comfort, courage. I often work with bear medicine. The eagle offers a higher perspective, clarity, helping you see beyond your inherited limitations to grow larger and bigger. And that's a big part of ancestral healing, is that we often are limited and reacting in ways that are of the times, rather than moving forward expansively and in a free way. The snake represents transformation and the shedding of patterns that no longer serve us, or that serve the collective or serve our families. Maybe the way that your parents disciplined you doesn't work for your family and your children, and you get to break outside of that and try new things. And these animal guides remind us that healing is not about rejecting the past. It's about transforming the relationship that we have with it. So when people talk about mommy wounds or daddy issues, they're often referring to experiences of emotional absence, criticism, instability, a lack of nurturing. And while these experiences can be painful, they can also shape individuals in ways that lead to profound growth and insight if you have the ability to release the suffering in it and claim the wisdom and the power. Many people who grew up without consistent support develop a deep awareness of the importance of compassion. They become sensitive to the emotional needs of others and often cultivate the ability to create safe, nurturing environments in their adult lives. In this way, the wound becomes a teacher. It becomes a point of passion. It becomes a purpose in your life. It highlights the very qualities that are needed in the world and invites you to embody them consciously. Daddy wounds can function in a very similar way. When people speak about daddy issues, they're often referring to experiences related to authority, protection, honesty, or boundaries. A person who grew up without a strong sense of guidance or accountability may spend their adult life learning how to create those qualities within themselves, learning how to self-regulate, learning how to control your inner worlds rather than letting them run wild. This may become people who value integrity, personal responsibility, and disciplined self-awareness. So just as mommy wounds can inspire greater compassion and emotional care, daddy wounds can inspire clarity, truth, and the courage to set boundaries. The absence of something in childhood can become the catalyst for developing that quality consciously in adulthood. And while you do have to do your inner child work, and this isn't always through healing work. This could just be through your conscious awareness, sitting with that inner child, knowing what that inner child wants, and being the adult to give it to your inner child. And then to release that suffering and embrace what it taught you and give that to the world. Often these mommy issues or daddy issues are invitations in your adult life to help the collective heal. When we look at the world through this lens, personal wounds begin to look less like personal failures and more like invitations to contribute something meaningful. If someone's family history lacked that nurturing, they might help bring more kindness into the world and into the collective. If honesty or accountability were missing, they may become people who champion for truth and integrity. And healing in this sense becomes very creative. Instead of repeating old patterns, individuals begin shaping the world with the qualities that they've worked so hard to cultivate. This is collective healing on a grand scale. This is setting the future generations up, not just in your lineage, but the lineage of the world, the whole next generation of people, into something more gifted, more powerful, more expansive. And when we begin to understand ancestral wounds in this way, the world's story changes, not just our personal story. Instead of seeing ourselves as people who simply inherited difficulties, we start to recognize that we also inherited the opportunity to transform them and transform our entire lives, the people around us, the world. Our ancestors did the best they could with the awareness and circumstances they had, even if that was not great. The fact that we can examine these patterns now suggests that consciousness itself has evolved within your lineage. Each generation gains new tools, new perspectives, and new opportunities to move the story forward. Healing is not about erasing. It's not about achieving perfection. It's about learning from what came before us, keeping the wisdom, honoring our ancestors' struggles and the things that they had to endure, and just releasing the things that no longer have to continue. Our ancestors went through darkness, learned how to make fire, and instead of carrying the torch forward, we've been living in the dark because they did. You don't have to. Carry the torch, grab the torch. Get out of that darkness. That's the whole reason they went through it. And if you find yourself working through a mommy wound or a daddy wound or any form of ancestral baggage, it may be helpful to remember that you're not just confronting or dealing with or staring at an old story. You're standing at a turning point, a crossroads, where that story can change, where you can change something for your entire family, for yourself, for the world, through the choices you make, the compassion that you cultivate, and the truth you're willing to live and embody. You help create a future that is lighter and more conscious than the past. And in that way, healing becomes an act of love, not only for yourself, but for the generations that came before you and the ones that follow after. A whole line of love, a world of love, of growth, of evolution. And that's what I want to see in my story and in yours. I'm Mary Colozzo. Welcome home.